I use Riverside for a lot of my stuff. It's amazing.
We tried Riverside and it didn't work for us. So we jumped here and we actually really love this one. So I'm going live
Amazing.
on Instagram. So we are officially live.
Yay.
Yay. So before I even make introductions, today we're talking about UI UX, how that fits into the marketer's journey. And I actually have a hot take or an unpopular opinion. I think it's going to
Ooh,
ruffle some feathers here. Ready?
In
oh,
So
Nicole.
as you know, I always have opinions, right? So as marketers, I think that so often we think the most impactful thing is going to be top of funnel. And I think the most impactful things we can do as marketers are middle and bottom of funnel. And a lot of times they're small, quick changes. And that plays a lot into UI UX. What do you guys think of that?
ooh. So middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. I do think from the perspective of UI, UX with those things. Ooh, I don't really agree with that because I feel like it's all across from beginning to end. So I guess I sort of agree with the later parts, because I feel like all across the funnel, from the first touch point to the last. So first top to the bottom of the funnel, like implementing UI UX principles um, makes sense to engage with how your ideal customers, right, where they're hanging out, how they like to use those platforms, which would be the UX of that. The human element. A lot of my focus is on human-centered design with the things I do, and I think that's why I have that perspective that it's all across. But I'm curious, Tamara, what do you think about that?
Well, so my knee-jerk reaction wasn't even if it's important or not. My knee-jerk reaction was usually marketers have to fight to be in that conversation because it's a funny fight to have because it doesn't make any sense. But I feel like a lot of times marketers are like, include me in this because this has to do with the user journey.
Yes.
Yeah,
And like, we want to see where people are dropping off, and that has a huge part in it.
yeah,
So
Absolutely.
when you said that, my initial thought was like, oh my gosh, it's so important. And usually marketing is kind of like consulted in the process as opposed to being like integral in the process, which I do find very interesting.
Yeah. So let me explain, and I'm going to do some intros here first, right? So I just wanted to throw that out there, start the conversation where we were at.
boom.
But welcome to What the Frac. We are your fractional team, and every week here on What the Frac Live, we bring a new amazing expert on here to talk a little bit more. We think through marketing strategies, tips, and topics in hopefully 20 minutes or less. We've never hit 20 minutes, Samara. I'm sorry. We need to change that. And today I'm so excited to have. I'm gonna say it wrong. We just found out that I've been saying your name wrong the whole time. I keep calling you Anebi. It's Anebi.
Yes.
Love it. But I've known you for a while now. Anyone in the Phoenix ecosystem pretty much knows who you are. You are a UI UX master. You are someone who thinks through all of the web parts of it, not just as like a web design, but your presence on the web. And you really help startups, small businesses, all of these people who are trying to build their company in that web space. And so I just thought this was going to be an amazing conversation. But if you want to if I missed some things there or
Oh,
misspoke
that's
there,
good to
please
hear.
let everyone
That's
know who
perfect.
you are.
No, that's perfect. You're generous with the introduction. But yeah, I'm a design guy. Over the years, I've had a variety of roles working in cybersecurity, web development, running an agency, product. So it's given me a unique viewpoint into the different touch points, different interactions, different platforms. And I'm like, what the heck am I? I'm some composite creature with experience in different areas. And I just call myself a digital architect because there's so many things digitally, from branding, how you show up online on different platforms, to your website, how folks interact with it, to even your backend tooling and how that works and ties into your marketing stack. There's just very like a lot of moving pieces to connect and think through, and for me it's just a lot of fun to think, to strategize, and help customers craft ways to do a good job across all these segments.
It's funny. I think that you wouldn't consider yourself necessarily a marketer, but web, so often from a client's point of view, web comes under the marketing, umbrella. And yet marketers a lot of times are not fully proficient in web and where you show up. And there's just so many crossovers. So I love that. That's why I thought you would be perfect here today. And okay, so I have to explain what my unpopular opinion was about, right? So the reason I think that top of funnel is really important as marketers, but I think that when you are a business owner or you're in a marketing position of strategy, what happens is the business owner says, hey, we're at, let's say, $250,000 a year. We want to get to $1 million. And the first thought that they have is we need more people in the funnel. Like we just need to get more people.
True.
And the issue I've had with that is that so often marketers are either not part of the conversation, like Tamara said, or they don't have experience with the middle and bottom of funnel, or they don't have the data they need to look at that funnel and say, okay, great, we're pouring a ton of people in the top, and okay, we're losing people here, or we can tweak our conversion rate here. And so no matter how many you put in the top, it's just pure physics. You're not going to get as much through the bottom. So that was my unpopular opinion. And let's talk at UI UX, I guess.
Now that you qualify that, I'm like, okay, I agree. That makes sense. With more qualification, that. And even from my anecdotal experience, right? I've started, scaled a few businesses. Some have failed miserably. Some have done better. And even I'm in that boat, like, going through we want to scale from 180 a year or whatever, want to scale revenue. And the first knee-jerk reaction or thought is, oh, we need more people to buy. But I think that brings the importance of being able to audit what is already working and having visibility into what is the funnel, right? And what does that look like if there are UI visual components to it? And what does it look like if there are, like for the interactions, the UX, like how are they using the platforms or your marketing stack to go across from beginning to end of your funnel? But I think from a user experience, UX, UI perspective, the first start is to audit, to deconstruct what you already have, like how are users going across your journey from end to end, right? Where are the touch points? Where are the areas where they have friction, for example? And maybe putting yourself in the shoes of the user, like empathy, right? That's human-centered design right there. It's like, okay, how are users, our customers, or potential customers or ideal customer personas actually going through this funnel? Are they stopping somewhere in the middle and then we're having churn or whatever? And then when you understand that, then it's a lot easier to tweak those variables so that when you add more to the funnel, it actually translates to, at the end of the day, paying customers. You have better conversions. But again, I'm coming from a place of I haven't done that perfectly, and I've also been on the end of, oh, just get more eyes looking at it, get more traffic to the website, and that's not a winning strategy. By virtue of the mathematical more numbers, you will get a few more people and like, oh yeah, it's working, but that's a losing game, and you will burn out and lose a lot of money doing that.
Well, there's so many variables, right, when it comes to getting people into the top of the funnel that are out of your control. But when you talk about kind of the middle of the funnel, it's very scientific, right? So I'm curious what you do. Like when a company comes to you, do you use tools? Do you do it yourself? Like what is your tactic for going through and like investigating where the drop-offs are in a funnel? And how do you go about it?
They're very quick things to do with tools. Honestly, even looking at the SEO analytics is a part of that process, just to see, okay, who's coming to the site, how much are you getting, what's the bounce rate, right? Many sites have bounce rates of over 50%. So over 50% of people who land on the first page, usually landing page, They're like, when? I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. They don't really even stick around. And then you have the time on page, the number of seconds people actually navigate around. Many times it's a few seconds. Now, if it's more sticky, you have maybe a minute and a half or so. So those are all things that I look at for a quick picture visual. And then I start to go through, again, if we're looking at a web asset, like a website or e-commerce, I can use analytics tools to then see what pages are they navigating to. If you have a buyer journey and there's a page where someone actually clicks purchase, subscribe, pay, whatever your CTA is, right? How many people are making their way to that page, to that CTA? Now you may have that CTA on your homepage as well. Are people actually even clicking on that? Maybe they're going to your payment page and they're just not going beyond that, right? So that's an interesting problem to look at. Like who's clicking, what are they doing, are they confused, maybe the page is hidden, tucked away somewhere in your navigation. I have to go click work with us and it takes me somewhere, and then it's like, too many steps. So from a UX perspective, one, I want to shorten the journey as much as possible for someone to get to the middle funnel before they convert. And then I also want to make sure that we're, even with our copy, the way you're talking to your customers, is that on point? Does that make sense? So it's so many different things. For short answer, summarize is I use analytics, I look at SEO as well, and then I use some other tools to look more in depth at what those journeys are. And there's also email. That's another can of worms, right? Are you doing drip campaigns on email? What's your open rate? What's your click-through rate? So those are all things that I look at to see where are people getting stuck in the middle of this funnel, and what are ways, quick wins we can do to optimize that.
Yeah.
You know what's funny, Nicole? Like one of the things. Oh, to your point, really quick about the middle of the funnel. There's something that I've tried to put in practice at least every 6 months. And it's because I read this article 2 years ago that was like, you would be surprised at how many times your links disappear that you set up. And so like, if you set something up last year and then you're still using it and you're pouring money into getting people to go through it, but like, there's a high likelihood that link is either like not working anymore or disappeared or something like that. So like, even something as simple as that could be a huge issue. And it's all about just fixing the link.
No, completely. Most people don't know this. I come from a web and software background. I've built software, I've built web. Like I come from that space, and it's interesting to talk to marketers who don't come from that space and not realize these pieces. One of the things that you just said that was really important is that there's data. And I don't consider myself a marketer. I am a marketer. I don't necessarily consider myself just a marketer. And when I talk to people who are marketers, what I find is that a lot of them are allergic to data. Not their fault. They're allergic to it because either A, they have not been given the tools to actually see the data. B, they are being unfairly judged. Their campaigns are being unfairly judged on the wrong data. Or C, it's not being attributed correctly. So they have a little bit of like PTSD around actually giving data to a client. But the one thing you can't do is you cannot get the most out of your efforts without seeing that data. Because a lot of times it's a quick fix, right? How many times have you heard that changing a button color, like, add to cart, actually changes the amount of conversions, right? Like there's some small pieces, making sure your links are working, making sure your buttons are the right color, making sure that when someone hits a page and, okay, we see this many this is the amount of people who hit that page, we change the messaging, now we see less people hit that page, right? Like these are ways that you validate your campaigns. And I think that it's such an important part. So if someone out there was like, okay, great, I'm a marketer, I'm doing campaigns, but I don't have access to any of this data, or I have an app and that I'm doing marketing for, like, what is their first step to actually getting access to some of this data?
Okay, so I'm going to ask that again so I make sure I understand. Someone has an app, for example, and they haven't looked at any analytics or data, and they're like, oh crap, how do I get access? What's the first step for that? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now it depends on where that leads. There are a lot of tools that can help you plug in to get that data. Now, if it's an app store thing, some of those already have analytics, like the Google App Store has some analytics. Going to extend a bit. Chrome Extension Store has some analytics for that. You can use Firebase and other tools. iOS has some native analytics if you have an app on there. So that's all places to start. I say start with the default that's available to you. If you're not doing any analytics yet, don't go pay for, any tool subscription. Start with what you have available to you. Some tools inherently have analytics already. Start there, max that out, understand how it works. And then if you're scaling out a bit, there are many other tools that will let you do app analytics, right? There's Heap Analytics. There's not Fathom Analytics. I'm drawing a blank on that. My brain is Google Analytics too. Actually, it's free. Free being Google's using your data and try to sell you crap, and using your data points to sell to advertisers. But it's available, right? Google Analytics. Some people don't know this. You can also add Google Analytics tags to apps or websites or other kinds of assets people interact with, so long as it's something online. Many cases you can add that. So that's a great place to start. There's a lot of learning resources, a crap ton of learning resources from Google, on YouTube, and everywhere else on how to integrate that. So those are some really great places to start. And obviously, they're more paid. The Segment, I think Segment.io, it's the Twilio guys that own that. So it provides a lot of data. There's Hotjar. I can keep going on and on. A lot of these tools begin to do very similar things. If you understand the fundamentals of data to look for, what to look for, then regardless of the tool and its idiosyncrasies, you can figure it out if you understand the concepts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but for me, when I put KPIs to things, like everyone wants to put like a revenue KPI, I think that actually those data points can make for really good KPIs, because if we know that our conversion rate when someone downloads something or gets to a certain page is at 40%, and we jump it up to 50, it's going to automatically give us revenue, right? So I don't know. I like to base my KPIs on things that are other than revenue, and these data points give us a really good spot for that.
So at this conference I'm at, something with Qualtrics. I'm at the Qualtrics X4 conference right now. I was in a panel yesterday on building human-centered design teams in government, or human-centered team in government. That was fun. But I listened to a bunch of other folks speak, and one of the speakers was I don't forget his name now. Like, he's a head guy from Porsche. And one thing that stuck with me, he said that one metric to look at is, I think, excitement, customer excitement. It's like, that is interesting. And customer excitement for them, they send out surveys, right? And they look at, it's 3 questions. Let's see if I remember. It's like, were you satisfied with this service? And I think, was this beyond your expectations? And there's a third one, I forget what that means. But what I'm focusing on is the beyond expectation one, because they found that those who said this was beyond my expectations, right, ended up being stickier and they spent more. Excited customers spend more. So I was like, interesting. I wonder how this can play into other products. Porsche probably would never have a Porsche. It's not my thing. They're beautiful vehicles, but how does that play into digital assets, e-commerce, other products folks are selling? So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting metric, and figuring out the ways to measure that.
I know Tamara's excited about that because she talks all the time about feedback loops. This one over here loves it.
Well, but like what's really captivating about what you said was, and a struggle that I think everyone has, is how do you measure sentiment? How do you measure, we talk about brand awareness, right? How do you measure that stuff? And what you're talking about is you're finding ways to do surveys to capture it. So like there's workarounds. It isn't all just in the data. It's about that outreach to your customer and then asking the question and then capturing that as data.
Yes.
So I love it. And I also love talking to customers. I think all too often customers are taken out of the equation and seen more virtually, especially because I think a lot of the work that I've done is like virtual, right? It's marketplaces and things like that where you're interacting really just through platforms. And so the customers then become data points versus actual human beings who are shopping with you. So doing that outreach, talking to your customers, and then creating data around that. But I love excitement because that's a new one.
That's one we're gonna have to jam on and refund for a while, because that's something I'm gonna be thinking of ways to do. But when you talk about sentiment analysis, so a lot of my experience before I became a product guy, and now I'm like, what? Who am I with all these roles? But I started off as a data analytics guy, and I remember working at Zelle. I was an early employee at the beginning of Zelle, and one of the things we're trying to measure was figuring out sentiment analysis of the brand Zelle when they first launched. And I was scraping massive amounts of data off social media, so Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And if we did LinkedIn, I forget, but the main platforms. And looking at, okay, what's the sentiment like? And then direct surveys and polls of customers. Within the app itself, Zelle app, and online, email, and then feeding all of that into one place, and then figuring out, okay, is the sentiment more positive, or is it more negative? Is it okay? Where are the trends? That was a lot of fun, because I was a business intelligence predictive analytics guy then. And then we tied that in also with phone switch data. So we had Cisco phone switches, so the calls, customer service, complaints, and stuff like that. And then we were seeing, okay, what complaints, because those calls are logged and transcribed. So it's like, what kinds of complaints are we getting from that channel? So it was very omni-channel, scraping from everywhere and trying to unify that. Now that was very manual for me at the time, getting in one place on Tableau dashboards. I bet there are tools now that help you plug into all the channels, and the AI or machine learning algorithm does some of that for you. But it's very fascinating to start to think about, how do we measure stickiness with customers, the sentiment, are they excited? That was new. I'm like, I never thought about that. Customer excitement.
Well, there's social listening now, right? Like different tools do the social listening. I know Sprout Social does that. It's one of the things that I liked about them. And playing around with, okay, so what are our customers saying? And does it sound happy? Does it sound negative? So you are able to do that. But one of the easy things, one thing that I did when I didn't want to pay for some of these tools is I did a survey of customers, and I got like 600 responses, and I took all the responses and I put them into a word cloud.
Nice.
And so then I just saw, which is actually funny, because I didn't, and then I started breaking it down by some questions, right? But so then I took the whole thing, I did the general survey, put it into a word cloud, got the responses. And then I took certain questions that I really wanted to pull out, and I put in, that was just my cheat for it. Cause then I saw, what are the common words that are coming out? Because one of the things I really wanted to do was, is my messaging, sorry, let me back up. My goal was, okay, let me find out, is my messaging hitting the mark? So I want to find out if people are going to regurgitate my messaging in their responses. So in some of the questions, I tried to pull it out, and I wanted to find out, are they going to use the word trust? Is trust going to be the number one word that comes up? Right?
Was it?
It was one of the top 10.
Awesome.
Okay. Fair.
Number one, but it was one of the top 10. So I was like, I'm gonna take this as a win.
Yes. That's amazing.
One thread that I'm seeing that I want to make sure the people who are watching get through this is that, this information is not just to inform your KPIs or your revenue or things like that. It's also to inform your next steps, your plans for the future, and what even product releases and things like that. We had a client who they had an in-person store, and they were like, oh, surveys, we're not going to email out surveys, we don't get enough back, whatnot. They had a sale where people were literally lined up. It was like their big day. It was a dispensary. It was 420. They had their sale, and in order for people to get their t-shirt, like their free t-shirt, we actually handed them a piece of paper where they circled their answers. And it was 5 questions. And what was really great about it is by the end, we had 750 responses, where normally we would get, a handful of people maybe to respond. And it actually disagreed with what's part of the owner. We had like a few owners, and they didn't agree on what their customers thought about the store. And it actually proved some of them wrong, prove some of them right, and we were able to now say, okay, now knowing this is the answer, how do we move forward from that? So the data should inform your UI UX, it should inform your marketing plan, it should inform where you pivot and your budget, like all of these.
Yeah, I think that's one really essential thing is like, I think we forget, maybe business owners forget sometimes, that like you can create something, but who ultimately decides what it is your customers.
Yeah. Absolutely. And all of that makes me think of it's like a joke in the data space where it's like, in God we trust, all others bring data. But yeah, last time I checked, we're not God. So data, please. But that's really cool. And it also brings up another point with surveys and hearing your customers. The most effective channel is where your customers are at, where they hang. In that case, they were at the dispensary. Great. Captive audience, hit them there. That is, hey, scan this QR code and maybe get back to us later. It's like, no, it's like, they're here right now. Get it from them. So that's a very interesting, that's a great example.
So just kind of going, bringing this all around in a circle here. So if you wanted to go from $250,000 a year to $1 million, whatever, you have an e-commerce site, you have a business, it doesn't matter. UI UX is not just app developers or software developers or any of those pieces. Like, no matter what business you have, you can consider the customer journey. And I think that's one thing I really like about your method, is that you keep talking about human, bringing the human back into the journey. And one thing I would say is that the thought of, we need more customers and we need to fix our conversion rate or fix our abandoned cart percentage or any of those pieces are not mutually exclusive, right? We're doing all of this kind of at the same time. So business owners are, have a lot on their plate. Marketers are, need to do social media, email, everything. Where do we start? How does someone who maybe the executive team hasn't thought of UI UX, how do we start bringing UI UX into our strategy?
Yeah, I'd say don't overcomplicate it. When people think UI UX, sometimes their eyes gloss over. They're like, oh, that's so expensive. But like you said, UI UX does not have to be so complex. To break it down, UI, the user interface. So how does it look, right? Not to be overly simplistic. The UX, the user experience. How do they use this thing that you have? Like, this could be in a physical store, honestly. There's physical UX. How are people navigating? You go to a restaurant. This is a pet peeve of mine, and then I'm going to get into a restaurant or coffee shop. Go to the restroom, right? And let's say there are 2 doors. You look on each one. It doesn't have a sign that tells you vacant or closed. So you're awkwardly knocking and jiggling like, oh crap, there's someone in there. You go to the next one, UX, right? Good UX, have a freaking vacant sign on that door when no one is in there or occupied. But I mean,
I love that.
When we think UX, we think, oh, digital, but it can be in a physical space too. How do people navigate whatever product service you're providing? What's their perception of it? So when companies think about UI, UX, I think a good start, one, obviously, consumers now are used to like good presentation. If you can present even a crappy product in a good way, again, I don't care if it's digital or in person, physical, if it's presented in a good way, one, the propensity for people to buy that already goes up a notch. And then if their experience of it is good, they're like, oh, this was easy. I'm going to say good. It's easy for them to use, to leverage. also the propensity to buy that, again, whether physical or digital, goes up. So when we think UI UX is, okay, how can you present your stuff in the best amount of way possible with your budget, and how can you make it stupid simple for those to whom you're providing that service to navigate their way to actually buying the freaking thing. Some businesses you look at like, are you actually trying to actively not sell your product? And that's a good way to start. But how do you know that sometimes? Well, putting yourself in the shoes of your customer and asking them questions. And then you see a pattern. By the time you ask 10, 20, 30, 100 people, you're going to do that word cloud or whatever method you use. And you're going to say, oh, all of them said this was hard to buy. Oh, why was it hard for them to buy? The UX of that. And then you fix that problem. And then you do it again, rinse, repeat. It's not something that's done and dusted. That's the funny thing. It's never completely, it's going to be an endless game of looking at your UI, looking at UX, asking questions, and iteratively making changes, because what was true yesterday might not be true tomorrow. We see how user patterns and consumer patterns shift depending on the season, right? Or there's a pandemic. Oh, great. Now people are not coming into my physical store. Crap, I need to build a website for people to buy stuff. Or you had a web, so there's so many different variables, right, that can affect even if your UI UX worked at some point, well, it might not work tomorrow. So again, you have to re-poll your customers to see what works and then tweak that. So I don't know if that's an overly simplistic way to explain that, but that's what comes to mind when I think about folks who are considering that.
It might be the best way I've heard. It might be the best way I heard. And quite frankly, like, you know, when people always ask me, like, how do I get PR, right? Like, how do I get people, like news channels, to want to like cover my product or my event? I'm always like, well, build something that's worth a story, like that has a story. It's the same thing with UI UX, right? Like people always ask, like, how do I get someone to tell their friend? And they always want to put the $20 gift card or the payment back. And PayPal did a really good job of that. But also you have to build a product they want to talk about and they want to tell people about. So if you're thinking about your customer, and then don't get offended when something's not right, right? So the best thing that could happen is that your customers actually tell you that something's wrong, or that you see it in the data where something is, because for a long time, you could be knocking your head against the wall trying to figure out, I have a good product. I don't see anything wrong. Why are people not buying? Whereas if I see there's something wrong, I could fix it. And listen to your customer. Don't just say, well, they just don't understand it. And that's what a lot of business owners do, is they say, they don't get it. It's too innovative for them. They don't see why. And no, that's a problem with your marketing. That's a problem with your messaging. And that's a problem with your UI UX.
There's something that I always try and do, because I've seen like what you're talking about, kind of like the friction to get from awareness to whatever the goal is, right? Of what you want someone to do. And so I always map out the steps, and I'm like, does it take more than 3 steps? Like, it shouldn't take more than 2 steps. Does it take more than 3 steps? Okay, we're at 9 steps. That's too far, right? Like, just literally write down how many steps did it take for me. How long did I have to scroll before I had this, purchase, or what is it? Like, you just have to like look at it practically, which I think is kind of like, that's the first thing you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
I have 2 tests. I always do. Number 1 is the mom's test. I give it to like my mom or someone's mom and like have them go through it and see if they can get to where they need to get to. We've been through a million project management softwares. One of the reasons we went with ClickUp was because I literally gave it to my mom, and with no instruction, she could start using it and like actually did a really good job on it. And then the second test, what was my second test that I was going to say? Tamara, I love flowcharts. I build the flowchart. I go through all the pieces. And I don't remember what my second test was going to be. I'll remember it in a second. My brain's been a little bit off lately. Sorry, guys. You don't get a second test. Just do the mom's test. That's it.
Did you know there's a book called Mom Test? The Mom Test?
No.
It's a great book. And I think it's themomtest.com. Let me see. The Mom, great book on building products, and momtest.com. Now I'm going to check this. Mom Test. So it's a really great book that walks you through. You may have assumptions, right? On I'll find the link and I'll share it, but you may have assumptions on a product you're trying to sell, and it's a bit on the flip side where it's like your mom will probably tell you, let's say like, hey mom, I made this new thing. Well, she's your mom. So they say, oh, that's awesome. I'll buy that. You know, you're like, oh great, my mom loves it. 200 other people are gonna buy the same thing, which, you know, that's awesome and stuff. But then she's your mom and she has affinity for you and stuff. So the mom test talks about scale that up. You want to get to about 50 people around there. The idea is just more volume. Then you can really see the patterns. And then there are the people who will tell you, yes, I'll buy that. But then you like, hey, by the way, I launched it, and then crickets, right? They're hyping you up, but they won't buy. So how do you actually get to your first true fans or first true customers, and systematizing that? So anyway, it's a great book. Momtest.com. That's a good reminder. I need to go through it again. I think he made it into a course, a 1 hour course or something like that as well.
That's
Nice.
great. But yet my mom brain takes offense to it at the moment since
Oh gosh, I love that.
well,
Like,
I can
so
use
right? No, well, I mean, I guess it depends on the age of your mom, what industry your mom's in. I mean, you're a cool mom, right? Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying?
I just put
Well,
a link in the chat. Too long.
Oh, perfect.
View. It's like a summary of it. It's amazing.
Perfect. We'll include that in the show notes and everything. Awesome. I love UI UX. I think there's so much more we can talk about and we can break it down. I know that you just gave us a really great overview. I've never heard someone like break it so simply down. I think that we talked about how, you know, it is not just a digital piece. It's not just for software. It's about going through and having, you know, the user experience and that human piece. If you could add, so we're wrapping up here. Last question. If you can tell someone, 3 ways to add human elements to their user flow, what would be the 3 things that you would say?
Ooh, 3 ways to add human elements to their user flow. 1, speak plain English, get rid of technical jargon, and technicalese, because you look at many websites, and I've been guilty of that, and you're like, what the heck? I still don't know what it is. So speak plain English that your customers can understand. The average American speaks colloquial English at a 5th grade level. So there are tools to help you, and it's not dumbing down, it's just that's how people talk. You don't say, oh, I want to juxtapose these 2 different, it's like once isn't regular, you know, talk. So speak to your customer, know your customers, speak plain English to them. It already makes it, you know, more human. Make it easy for your customers to buy whatever it is you're selling, because you're catering to them. You don't want them wading through a bunch of murk to get to that. That makes it, you know, more human-centered, catering to them. And then the third, that's a hard one. I'm like, what's a third thing I would add to that? I would say maybe don't overcomplicate it. Many times you feel like things, oh, it needs to be complex. It seems sophisticated. This again ties to the other 2 points. It's like simplify as much as you can. If you think it's simple, maybe there's room to simplify it a little more. So you're the human at the end of the day can actually leverage that.
Yeah, and I think also just listen to your customer, right? Like we just said, like listen to your customer, involve them in the process. Like they are the ones who, so often in software we spent so much time on a feature that our customers really weren't that excited about, and money, and then they really just wanted this quick little fix to something, right? So listen to your customer and speak to them. As marketers, we like to tell them why they should care instead of trying to talk to them like they should, you know, what their challenges are, what they feel. So one
other thing that I almost forgot, for those who are visual, picture a series of circles, concentric circles, with the customer, the person being in the middle of that bullseye. Another great visual. And then around that is process, tools, your website, whatever it is you're selling. But that's a good way for me that I think when I'm building anything, building software on physical space, designing is like the person, the human element is the bullseye in the middle, and then the other things radiate outside of that. It's a good, helpful visual to think through that.
It's why we put pictures to buyer personas, right? So that we can actually visualize them when we're writing or making things for them. I love that a lot. So Anebi, and I did it right, Anebi.
Yeah.
How can people, they've now heard you, they've heard what you're talking about, they want to implement UI UX or they want more information about their web presence. How do they get in touch with you?
I mean, LinkedIn is my jam. I'm mildly obsessed with LinkedIn. So folks can reach out on LinkedIn to chat. All the social media platforms, but LinkedIn is great. I own an agency as well, or own a majority stake in it. So I have folks there who can have these conversations with folks, to help them. And you know me. I love talking with folks and offering feedback and doing the best I can to support the community. So hit me up on LinkedIn.
Don't you have a podcast too?
Oh yes, forgot about that. I do have a podcast, the Inflection Podcast, and 41 episodes and counting. We're at an inflection point now, no pun intended, with the podcast as we look at the future seasons coming up. We're talking with sponsors and other partners to see where to take it. But the focus of the Inflection Podcast is to bring in thought leaders, business leaders, just interesting people doing good work to talk about their stories. How did you get to where you're at right now? You didn't just drop out of the sky. It's been a series of turning points, series of inflection points. How can we deconstruct those so people listening can learn from it, be inspired, and practically go apply stuff in their own context?
Awesome.
I love it, and I love the name.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us some of your knowledge. This is What the Frac. We will include there you go. Yes.
I have to do that.
We'll include how do we do that? Where am I going? I don't know what's going on here. Okay, well, StreamYard here needs to give me some instructions. Listen to the customer.
Camera
anyway,
at this point.
There we go. This is What the Frac. Join us at What the Frac Show on YouTube, on Instagram, whatthefractshow.com. We have new episodes every week. We'll be dropping one on Podcast Revenue here shortly. And thanks for joining us.
Hit that like.
That was really hard to do with you guys doing this. Just letting you know. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.